I've never been entirely happy with that slogan of my many Quaker friends with whom I've shared plenty of experiences about speaking truth to power. We should be speaking truth about power, but not to power, rather to the people who are going to get rid of it. And that's a slightly different slant on the thing, I think. Maybe it doesn't ring as well, but it seems to me more accurate. Well, as you all know, our meeting happens to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, the other end of the country, and it is almost inevitable, I guess, but even appropriate that we should take this time to think seriously about contours of world order as they were then, what the prospects are for them now, and what the factors are that have determined them and will continue to determine them. Well, 50 years ago, there were two conflicting visions of the new world order of the day. You're only hearing one of them in the commentary on the United Nations, and it's in fact only one of them that gets publicly articulated, but there was another one. They're both highly relevant today, I think. The one that one hears all the time is the vision of the United Nations and all the wondrous things we hope for and are dedicated to. The United Nations may now be facing its demise because of its alleged failure in bringing about these marvelous things to which we're committed. The second vision is what's sometimes called realism in international relations theory, which is critical of what they call the utopianism that accompanied the forming of the United Nations and that still resounds in the rhetoric. And the realist vision was also articulated 50 years ago, in fact, with great clarity, perhaps most clearly by one of the most respected statesmen of the 20th century, in fact, speaking for the victors in World War III, Winston Churchill, one of the World War II, sorry, that's the next one, speaking for one of the big three, one of the victors. He explained at the time, 50 years ago, that, in his words, the government of the world must be entrusted to the satisfied nations who wish nothing more for themselves than what they had. Our power placed us above the rest. We are like rich men dwelling in peace within our habitations, rather ample habitations, and we must keep the hungry nations under control or there'll be danger. Well, that's the realist vision. Earlier in the century, in fact at the peak of British power, right before World War I, Churchill articulated this vision with greater clarity in internal discussions of the British cabinet, which have only recently been declassified, released. Here he said, "We are not a young people with an innocent record and a scanty inheritance. We have engrossed to ourselves an altogether disproportionate share of the wealth and traffic of the world. We have got all we want in territory, but our claim to be left in the unmolested enjoyment of vast and splendid possessions, mainly acquired by violence, largely maintained by force, often seems less reasonable to others than to us. So we have to teach them regular lessons in reasonableness." And in fact, in this internal secret meeting, he was calling for an increase in the military budget so that the lessons can be taught better. A sanitized version of that did reach the public with all the offending phrases removed, but that's the actual version, and a very good one. I ought to add that the more humane among the conquerors didn't always find the measure so reasonable. For example, Adam Smith, who 200 years ago, bitterly condemned what he called the savage injustice of the Europeans, who, as he saw very clearly, were brutally creating the first world, third world divide that's now so dramatic and was much less so at the time, in fact, virtually undetectable at the time, created, as he pointed out, by the savage injustice of the Europeans. Well, Adam Smith was a figure of the Enlightenment, pre-capitalist and, in fact, anti-capitalist in fundamental ways. And he was also smart enough to detect the fundamental illusions of the realist position. One of them was that, contrary to Winston Churchill, the rich men are never satisfied. Rather, as Adam Smith pointed out, they will always follow what he called the vile maxim of the masters of mankind, all for ourselves and nothing for anyone else. Second, the we who are enjoying their vast and splendid possessions acquired by violence were not the people of England or France or the United States and so on, except for accidental exceptions. Rather, as Smith put it, the principal architects of state policy design it to ensure that their own interests are most peculiarly attended to, however grievous the impact on others, including the people of their own country. Which is quite a valid observation. The principal architects, he went on to say, were the merchants and manufacturers. That's changed. Now it's the huge transnationals and financial institutions. But the picture is valid. He was no fool. So to correct the realist story, the realist vision with Adam Smith's insights, it comes out like this. The rich men of the rich societies will pursue their vile maxim, seeking to expand their vast and splendid possessions, which they have gained by violence and maintained by force, resorting to savage injustice when necessary, and those who don't play that game will fall by the wayside. The lot of the vast majority of the population is just to serve and to suffer. That's the realist vision. Incidentally, these observations of Adam Smith's and Churchill's can be generalized to domestic forms of property, so-called property rights, and possibly even to a proposition that's being debated not too far from here, but I leave that to you. Well, that's one vision of world order. The other was the vision of the United Nations, or at least the rhetoric that accompanied its founding. And I won't review that because we're engulfed in it all the time in a flood of such pronouncements presented with great self-adulation as our permanent and noble commitment. Since you know all this by heart, I won't waste time on it. We can ask realistically, however, whether the people who produced the rhetoric have ever believed a word of what they were saying, or whether either consciously or maybe not too far below the surface, they actually adopted the realist vision that was advocated by Winston Churchill and corrected and condemned by Adam Smith. That's a fair question, and I think historical practice provides a rather clear, if not particularly flattering answer to it. Well, there are, of course, plenty of people who are deeply committed to the vision of the rhetoric and who hoped and often sought to make it a lot more than that. I suspect that that includes the vast majority of the population of the world, which is why reality always has to be masked in so much secrecy and deceit. It's, after all, easier to tell the truth. Why construct the illusions? Also, this includes some fairly prominent individuals. But power has always resided elsewhere. Those were the visions of world order then. We know which one succeeded, and I don't think it's fundamentally different now.